What happened in qualifying for the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix? Hello everybody and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Alex. That's right, once again Tommy is still on holiday and Alex is still filling in beautifully. Alex, we're just off the back of qualifying. What is your overarching thoughts and feelings as we go into this podcast?
I thought at the start of the day that whoever took pole was going to have to really show us all of their talent and a bit more. And he did. He had to dig deep. He was out of breath on the radio at the end. He was punching the air. That was a proper pole position from Max Verstappen. And it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Because he's been on pole for every single race this year. But that is a really special lap to deliver. And if you consider, two McLarens within a tenth of a second, that's pretty unusual to get one team that close.
Now, before we dive into Q1, we've got a question from Drew the intern. Is Tommy on holiday with Crofty? Seems awfully coincidental that they're both off this weekend. Now, I've not had official confirmation. I've not actually seen any sort of live footage from Tommy on holiday and Dubrovnik, but perhaps there is a secret relationship going on there. I'm not going to say any more than that. Tommy might well go and start his own podcast with Crofty. Now, let's dive into Q1, shall we? Where the 5 bottom drivers were Bottas, Zhou, Magnussen, Alonso and Sargent. The first question comes in from Annalise Cameron. Should track limits still be a thing when there is so much gravel and self-punishing things? I assume more specifically around this track. Track limits are there at the moment for a reason to try and keep everything at a level playing field on a foundation that we can all understand. So I do see why the FIA wouldn't just tear up the rulebook. They have done it in the past, but they haven't torn it up this time to essentially say that the gravel is now policing track limits. But maybe in the future that could be something, because I think all of us, especially people that watch the sport, love the entertainment, the coming across the line. Whoever comes across the line fastest should be on pole position. But then we have all of these investigations for track limits. Perhaps that is the future, but not right now.
I, to be honest, agree with the person asking the question. I think it's when there's a physical deterrent on the outside of the circuit, you don't need to get involved with track limits. It's a strange one. Around here, it's not very necessary.
It's not at all. Now, as we are in Q1, I think the big talking point has to be Fernando Alonso. 19th, would have been 20th had Logan Sargent not had his lap time deleted. A really scruffy weekend for Fernando Alonso so far. Of course, crashing in practice, which we thought at the time may have been curtains for his qualifying. Thankfully for him, they managed to put the car together, only for him to then run across the gravel again in Q1, not be able to put any kind of lap time on the board. And this is back-to-back pretty difficult weekends for Fernando Alonso, it has to be said. You don't tend to expect him to be on the back row of the grid with Logan Sargent if he doesn't have any sort of mechanical issues. But that's where he sits tomorrow, which is crazy to think.
Yeah, I mean, he'd been in Q3 for every single session until then, hadn't he? Until last time out. Then he missed out in Miami and then missed out today. That's when a driver's trying to find a little bit more than the car's got underneath them. You're going to get errors like that, even from one of the best to ever do it. You can understand the frustration given how good things were for Aston last year. And they're having to get used to life having slipped back into the midfield a little bit. So, yeah.
Question from Mr. Idiot. When does the point come that we start calling Fernando too old for Formula One after another disappointing result?
When he's 50, next question.
I think it more does speak about and you kind of alluded to it, Alex, more the frustration and the fact that Aston Martin are clearly going backwards a little bit with the performance in the car, which means Fernando then pushes harder and harder to try and get into Q3 and to still get those massive points paying positions. And this is unfortunately what happens when you do push a little bit too hard, even for Fernando Alonso, who is so used to driving the worst cars possible and just hauling it into a great position.
Yeah, and we've seen every single driver off this weekend. It's just one of those things. We saw Carlos Sainz have an identical crash a couple of years ago at this corner. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Do not worry, Fernando Alonso's not lost it.
So other drivers to talk about, of course, both of the Alphas out with Bottas and Zhou. Magnussen, I mean, very difficult to see him down in 18th when his teammate, I think, went first at one point during Q1, which was quite the lap. Question from Omar R. Pepper. Is it over for K-Mag and Sargent? Should they be replaced mid-season? It's a gut-wrenching question if you're a Logie Sarge or K-Mag fan. What I will say, it's very difficult to see Logan Sargent in this particular position. He's a lovely guy and you hope for the best for him, but it just every single weekend we do not see any potential to not... It doesn't matter if he scores points on it necessarily because he's in a Williams, but beating Alex Albon, even just matching him, or even being a tiny bit behind, that is all that Williams ask for. And yet mistakes creep in week after week. And if you're James Vowles, who, of course, is probably one of the most understanding team principals, he's very relaxed and wanting to nurture and grow talent, and that's what he's trying to do with Logan. But at what point do you sit there and go, we are getting no return on investment here? The only time he scored points is when two people got disqualified. If you want Williams to be a front-running team, how can you be firing when you've got one great driver and one that is really struggling at the moment?
On Logan, the team have run out of patience, haven't they? They've publicly said that he's under pressure. We know that Williams have requested a special dispensation to run someone younger than 18 years of age to have a super license. We know that's Kimi Antonelli. So the writing's on the wall for Logan. And I guess it's slightly different with K-Mag because he's been blocked a lot in qualifying this year. He's been impeded quite a few times. So that's unfortunate.
He certainly does. And you've actually alluded about another point to talk about very briefly in Q1, which may well scupper Oscar Piastri's chances of winning tomorrow if McLaren are quick. And it's the fact that he blocked Kevin Magnussen on one of his fast laps, which is a big shame for him because, of course, he's on the front row of the grid. As of recording right now, it doesn't look like he's going to get away with it. I'd imagine it'd be a 3-place penalty that he gets slapped with. Whether it's been updated as a recording, I'm not sure, but it does seem like that is a pretty stonewall penalty.
Yeah, it's a great shame as well, because did he even need to be out there at that stage of the session? He was through, wasn't he? I'm pretty sure McLaren had no real need to be out there at all. Bit of a communication breakdown between team and driver, and it could cost him a front row.
We shall see on that one. Let's go to Q2 then, where the bottom 5, I suppose, were Perez, Ocon, Stroll, Albon and Gasly. And a question, which of course is going to be directed at Sergio Perez, is Robocop70 saying, will this weekend's biggest flop be jobless come summer break? For those context, I predicted Sergio Perez's biggest flop, and it's kind of going that way. We might well see a 7 from 7, which would be the most unbelievable biggest flop streak ever to be seen on the internet. But Perez, 0.6, I think it was, that he was behind Max Verstappen in the end, which is a large margin, or is actually just over half a second. But either or, around a track, do you think half a second? Okay, that is pretty bad. But around a track that's 1 minute 15, that's even worse. So for Sergio, he's clearly lost a bit of confidence there. He crashed in free practice, which wouldn't have helped him going into qualifying. But out in Q2 was a big shock.
I think it's just one of those things. It's a circuit that punishes errors. I don't know how you're getting 7 out of 7, by the way. That's utterly ridiculous. But it's one to forget for him. But when Fernando Alonso is doing a similar thing, I don't think we can beat up on Sergio Perez too much. It's just forget about it and hope that it rains tomorrow.
Yeah, the weather at the moment looks like it's probably cleared up for now, so we shall see if that continues. We now go to, of course, the Alpine drivers. Gasly was looking really quick at one point and thinking, okay, perhaps Alpine can sort of creep into Q3, but that didn't really come off. Albon very much in this sort of no man's land that I feel like Williams are at the moment, where he just about gets out of Q1 and then will start around 13th or 14th position, which seems about what the Williams can do. And then Lance Stroll, who outqualifies Fernando Alonso 3 in a row now.
Yeah, I think the no man's land feels like the phrase to say. I mean, very frustrating for Aston Martin to fall back into the midfield after their heroics last year. Albon's doing what he can with that car. They've sacrificed some of that amazing top-end speed to be more competitive at other circuits, so it's a more drivable car, but it's lost some of its best attributes, and so he's constantly falling at the second hurdle in qualifying.
Let's go to Q3 then, where the top 10 was Verstappen, Piastri, Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Russell, Tsunoda, Hamilton, Ricciardo, and Hülkenberg. Now, the first question comes in from the Eric 1997. Does Yuki have a genuine chance of a Red Bull seat next year? Oh, it's the beautiful F1 fandom of, something great's happening for a driver. Let's take him to Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo's gone through that. Plenty of drivers have. Perez did when he wasn't in Red Bull. Then he went to Red Bull and everyone's like, oh, he's rubbish. He needs to be changed. It's just the way in which these sort of knee-jerk reactions happen. However, it is fascinating, especially with Yuki. He's had great periods. We spoke about it yesterday. He's on a good run of form at the moment. The only times he hasn't was at the sprint weekends. And where do you see Yuki in the future? Probably
in an Aston Martin, to be honest. I think he will naturally gravitate towards the Honda engine tie-up. That's why he got his Formula One chance in the first place. But he seized it. Just a great performance all round today. I love how he was given a hurry up at the start of the year. And to be honest, I think there was an expectation that if he didn't take this step up, that Liam Lawson might be in the car before the end of the season. He clearly took that very, very personally, even a hint of that being possible, and has taken a massive leap forward with his driving. He's leading that team right now. And I think I think he will get a chance to continue in Formula One. I just don't think it will be within the Red Bull setup.
Now, I think it's worth saying that, of course, Yuki did a phenomenal job throughout qualifying, throughout this weekend. But I will say that Daniel Ricciardo, despite him looking majorly off the pace of Yuki all weekend, to start a couple of positions behind in ninth. Now, he's extracted everything out of what he's possibly able to do this weekend. So I won't commend him fully because Yuki's looked better, but for Danny to start ninth and to give RB a great shout at some big points is something that does need to be shouted out.
Yeah, doing the job. I mean, I said in commentary earlier, this has all been a lot of fun, but what happens in Q3? Like we've all had a great time out here. It's a great circuit, but what happens in Q3? And they're next to each other. So job done. Still very impressive for Yuki to be out qualifying an 8-time Grand Prix winner. But look, it means a lot to that team. They're based 10 miles away. They're embedded with the town in Faenza. The town are understandably very proud of the fact they've got a Formula One outfit there. Great result for the team.
Now, let's get on to the part of the podcast I'm sure everybody is waiting for me in particular to reflect on, and it comes in from a question, HibsTwits03. What happened to Ferrari on that final run? I don't want to talk about it, to be honest with you. It's distressing. I can't believe... No. Front row, I thought, was absolutely nailed on for at least one of them, and for them to start fourth and fifth is, quite frankly... disheartening, painful, depressing, everything else that you can possibly think of. I'm very surprised to have not seen at least Leclerc thrust himself into the sort of mix of Piastri and Max. They just lost everything in that first sector. That was where it all went away, which leads me to believe that it all comes down to this tyre preparation again that Charles has been speaking about all year long. For them to be 3-4 tenths back in that first sector, and then they start to claw it back. You see purple sectors, but it's too little too late at that point. That pole's gone.
Yeah, Charles Leclerc was really good in sectors 2 and 3, but you can't give up 0.3 of a second to Max. It's over. It's over in that moment. I thought it was quite telling, and there was a stage appearance this morning from Charles Leclerc that I was just walking past on the way into the circuit, and he said, it's a different set of conditions today. He said it's very, very gusty. And I wonder if there is an inherent weakness with that Ferrari in high wind, because it was very, very, very gusty at Ravazza and all the way up the main straight. So I wonder if they've got a sensitivity. There was something odd going on in that first sector. If you took the timing graphics off the page and you compared Carlos Sainz to that first sector side by side with Max Verstappen, it looked like a different formula. Verstappen looked glued to the track. The Ferrari was just waiting and just the weight transfer, not happening. Yeah, disappointing, but they'll regroup, and still strong in sectors 2 and 3. Who knows what we get tomorrow?
I did find it interesting as well that Charles, on one hand, quite disappointed that he wasn't able to extract a little bit more. But then Carlos was basically sat there going, well, I told you the upgrades weren't as big as everyone said that it was going to be. It's all the media blowing it up. And actually, it was quite small. And I can't tell you the numbers, but it felt like Carlos was sort of brushing away that the upgrades shouldn't have taken them to where they needed to be. But Charles was only, a tenth and a half off of pole position. So it's not like they were that far. Carlos looked like he was struggling a little bit more than Charles out there. Mercedes had a pretty quiet day, but for them to both get through to Q3 was, I guess, a decent job for them. They don't seem anywhere close to the Ferraris and McLarens and the Red Bulls, but not as bad perhaps as Hamilton nearly got knocked out in Q1, I think it was, which would have been a disaster for him. But for Merck to be 6th and 8th, pretty decent. Of course, we've spoken about Tsunoda and Ricciardo, and then Hülkenberg, a shout out as well. So I think we'll probably wrap up the podcast there. Alex, I'm going to do it again to you. What are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts are no bold predictions. Let's go nice and safe. Say Max is going to win tomorrow. And then when we get something else, everyone will not point a finger. All right? That's a final thought.
They will thank you instead. Okay, so Max to win by 30 seconds tomorrow. Locked in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Live stream, Matt P1 Tommy, to come and watch along for the race. And we will see you, as always, for funniest tweets and all that good stuff very, very soon. Lots of love. See you soon. Bye.